I'm looking forward to this chat. That's a bit fancy, Ryan, again, with the little thing. Every time we come on these, we always get something new. I am absolutely delighted to be chatting with Danielle Guzman from Mercer today. Many of you will know Danielle. She's really active on LinkedIn and on all socials, Twitter as well. And I could talk forever, really. We just chat, don't we, Danielle? And I actually saw you in London. Was it last week? Week before? Can't remember. Yeah. Time travels quick. But yeah, we've got a brilliant session today talking about employee branding and employer branding, the connection between the two. I've got a ton of questions, but please use this opportunity to ask you questions. Let's just have a conversation and have a discussion and learn from each other. But first, Danielle, I wondered if maybe you wanted to just introduce a bit about Mercer and what Mercer does, and you and your role at Mercer, just for those that don't know you, can learn a bit about you first. So.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. It's a great way to start an otherwise quite gloomy, cold day in New York City. And it was great, absolutely, to see you a couple of weeks ago in London. So hopefully we can keep that tradition going into next year. So I'm the global head of social media for Mercer. We are an organization with about 38,000 people. We have over 70 different channels across a myriad of platforms across the globe, and a pretty dynamic and progressive team that does a tremendous job in bringing our conversations to life for our communities internally and externally on social media. In terms of what we do as an organization, we work across the health, the wealth, and the career aspects of all of our employees and client organizations. So you'll often find us either behind the scenes with employee benefits programs or helping on the investment side. And for some of us in the US, for example, that might render into a 401k, for example, or also just in all facets of career and the future of work, which is radically changing right now. And how do we enable and support organizations through this change?
Yeah. Is that your lovely dogs that I can hear, Danielle?
It is. Hopefully they're going to be quiet, but I have two puppies under a year and a half that are fighting right over there off camera.
If we see you get pushed off the screen, we know what's going on. And they're welcome to join us, Danielle. And we've got loads of people here. Michelle. Hi, Michelle. Amanda. Anita. Hello, Anita. It's like the group together. Actually, maybe we should get all three of us on here. Sandy, good morning. Mordecai. Great stuff. Nice to have you here. And Suzanne as well. Say hi in the chat. Say hi in the chat. And as the conversation gets going, please, contribute your questions. I've got loads to ask, Danielle, and we could just get this conversation moving. I know Mercer is really quite advanced in terms of activating employee voices on social media. So I would just, maybe you can just give us a bit of a journey, just to set the scene and the context about how you've done that. And how you got to where you are today, how it all started and how you got to where you are today, not career history, but more the, what's happening at Mercer and where you got to.
Yeah, so actually, when I jumped into the role, we were in a pilot. So with employee advocacy. So we actually had about 400 seats on a kind of enterprise platform that was accessible to employees. And it was basically opened up to anyone who wanted to participate. And we saw immediately that there was interest because our participation rate exceeded the number of seats. And at that point, it was very early in the journey and I joined in and there was really no structure, but that's okay. It was a pilot. People were just starting somewhere. However, it did start in a less traditional fashion in the sense that it was to demonstrate value to get leadership buy-in instead of starting with leadership buy-in. So we started backwards. I can't take credit for that. So the team takes credit for that, but it enabled us to quickly show some really clear ROI and then be able to bring that to senior leadership in order to demonstrate the possibilities if we were able to scale that. And so when I joined in, it was at that moment, it was pre-presentation, so to speak. So we definitely brought some data points together. We demonstrated the value. It was actually a very quick signature to go from 400 to enterprise-wide. And today we are enterprise-wide. We're fully integrated into the HRIS system for the organization. And every single employee that joins the organization automatically gets enrolled into what we call Mercer Voices. And it is a global employee advocacy platform that enables our colleagues to share their points of view.
Wow. So I'm going to jump into that because I had a question a bit later about that, but I'm going to talk about that now, because we have been talking about this. Do you start bottom up? Do you start top down? And it sounds like you started with the pilot to gain momentum and a bit of movement and convincing. So that's quite interesting because I do know a lot of organizations that start the top down but struggle a little bit. So if you were to do this all over again, would you start bottom up?
Oh, that's a great question, Sarah, because like I said, I walked into it, so I didn't make that initial choice. I think if I were to do it all over again, join an organization right now and be on this journey, I would first recommend we assess the state of social maturity in the organization, both at a leadership level and then also at an employee level, and then last at a team level, because those three kind of core pillars are going to really help inform how you go forward. And then you're going to have to determine where are those gaps or opportunities where you can kind of rally people around something and then work to demonstrate the value into the other areas. And I think every organization is so different, especially even people joining us today. You're probably coming from a very progressive organization where the leadership is telling colleagues, we empower you, we encourage you, please go out there and share your points of view, to other types of organizations that are a bit more traditional or conservative in their approach and not so kind of maybe willing to have people just freelance out there with kind of brand content and their own platforms. So you kind of have to meet people where they're at.
Yeah, you do. I think that's a really good point, actually, because a lot of leadership can get a little bit worried, a little bit resistant, a little bit scared. Maybe I'm going to use that word as well. Because you're telling them we need to activate our employees on social, and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. How do we protect the risk? I love hearing your dogs.
I'm stressing over here. I'm like, just as long as they're doing no more than what they're doing, we're okay.
No, don't stress. I just think it would be hilarious if they come see us on screen. I'm going to say hi to Laura as well, Esther. We've got so many people coming in. Kasmina, Marty. Oh, Anita, love the dogs joining. I know, Anita. We need to see the dogs. And Liam. Hello, Liam. Thank you for joining us. Actually, so talking about that, about the resistance to the risk, and then I'm going to come dig more into employee brand, employer brand, how the two mix. We've got some great questions around that. What guidelines and structure do you give employees that are setting out? It sounds like on the onboarding process, they're enrolled into the program, but do you let them go, or what guidelines or structure? I mean, a lot of people have a policy, but you can't be sure they've read the policy. So what sort of training and do you give them about, this is kind of okay, this is not really okay, here's examples? Do you do that? To help reduce reputational risk?
Yes, we absolutely manage reputational risk across the globe. So I would say two things. We are a split organization in the sense that part of our business, I mentioned we do investments as well as health and career. Our investments business is highly regulated. And that means that our colleagues in that investments business who are licensed professionals are governed by external regulating bodies that also need to be supported and managed at Mercer. So that part of the business is managed quite differently from a social perspective to the rest of the business. They don't have the same freedom to create and build conversations in the same way, or to take content and transform it in the same way as our other colleagues. And as an employee, including myself, every single individual at Mercer cannot take that content either and freely discuss it externally. So for example, if we go back to that global platform that we have, in that platform, we load up all of our core brand messaging. That content does have what we call suggested messaging. However, I'll speak to that in a minute. When it comes to investments, it's a requirement to use it. It's locked down by compliance and legal. It serves as an audit trail for the organization. So I can only share it exactly as is if I choose to share it. Now you can, however, go into the comments and add your own perspective. And maybe, Sarah, if you're speaking at a global investments event, I can go into the comments after I've shared it. I recommend don't make it the very first comment on the feed for other reasons. So allow the conversation to start. Then I can go in and I can say, I'm really looking forward to hearing Sarah talk about this, or to hear so-and-so talk about that. So you're starting to add in your own point of view, but the governing bodies beyond Mercer don't allow us to just randomly change that messaging. That's only for investments. So that part of our business has its own social media policy, its entire own training track, and we work very closely with them. And behind the scenes, on top of that, there's a monitoring tool that is common to anyone who's joining us today, that is pretty much in any financial services organization. It's pretty consistently used. Now, be separate to that, if you're a non-licensed investments professional, we have a very progressive policy. Our policy is 2 social media PowerPoint slides, big 12-point font with pictures, so there's not many words on it. Slide 1 is for the brand. So if you're joining us and you're responsible for any of our brand channels across the globe, it's literally maybe 300 words of what you are accountable and responsible for in adhering to protecting the brand and ensuring that we are working together with a shared purpose and values. And then the second slide is for our employees. So it's quick to read. It'll take you 2 minutes to read. It's in bullet format. It's in simple language. And it's more guidance and common sense, less than rules, because we start with a relationship of trust. If you've joined Mercer, you've joined Mercer because you have gone on a journey and you are sharing the values with us. You have gone to experience the culture and you want to be a part of it. So you feel connected to something, and then our goals are aligned bottom up, top down. So we all do contribute towards the same common objectives. And so that sense of collaboration and trust is really at the root of everything we do. So this is just simple reminders, because some people won't remember, right? If you put something on social media, once on social, always on social. If you put something into a direct message, sure, it is a private chat between you and I, but who's to stop you or me from taking that and putting it into a public forum? So just little things like that, so that people remember what they're saying and the context that they're being present in, and then what that means for them as an individual and associatedly with the brand. So we keep it simple. And then we reinforce that through our training. We do a tremendous amount of training at a very high level in terms of like overall governance, and then down to a micro level, working with specific teams in specific countries, perhaps even within a specific line of business, to really enable them against their goals. So we kind of go at all different levels, and we do that, some recorded, some in real life, really experiential, and then some through also kind of material that you can read as a pre-read almost, and then come back to us with specific questions.
That's super. Oh, do you know, I just had a question there and it's gone. What was that? It'll come back. I thought I should have written it down. Yeah. It sounds very clear then about how you approach this and how you do it. The question will come back. I can't remember. Whilst I'm going to wait for that, Marty had a question, so I'm going to pop that in. So pop your question. Oh, wow, we're already getting questions. Right, so here we go. Marty, how can employees develop their own brand without making their organization nervous?
That's a great question. I mean, I think we have to start with the baseline of where is your organization at? Because if you're joining us and you have a traditional approach to social media and you aren't at the place yet where you're really going to be able to empower your people, that's going to be a much more difficult conversation. It doesn't mean it can't be done. And perhaps you have to go more through the route of a spokesperson model, where you have certain people who you know have a big presence and you almost kind of approve them into being a spokesperson for the brand or to being an external advocate for the brand. And that's kind of at one end of the spectrum. That's limiting. You kind of have to approve them in. But if that's where your organization is at, I always kind of say, don't try and go against the friction, because that's going to not help anything. And if you can take small steps, even if it looks like it's diminishing returns, those small steps over time are going to help people build that comfort, and then you can kind of scale out. On the opposite end of the spectrum, though, if we look at from where I am, right in the core kind of vision for the organization, from the CEO down, it is all about empowering our employees to share their points of view. So with that said, that is your point of view on just about anything. Now, obviously, we also have a very close alignment in terms of what are our goals and why do we do what we do. So every employee understands that. It's kind of a core mantra that comes through all of our internal communications, our town halls, etc. So you learn that, and then you find where you connect with it. So if we think of me as an example, there's a breadth of content that I could be sharing from Mercer, but I absolutely focus on kind of the bigger future of work conversation. And that's not to say that the rest is not really high value. It is, but it's not where I connect on a personal level. And to me, that's an important piece, because then I can share, why is this relevant to me? How am I experiencing this? What does this mean for others, and how can they connect to it? And when you can create those real human connections, that's when the value kind of rolls forward. So when we train people, we say the same thing. Don't be everything to everyone. Just because you have access to all this content, ideally, you shouldn't be pushing it all out. You should be thinking about, who are you? What do you care about beyond your day job? And where are the points of intersection with what you do and what we do at Mercer? And those are the pieces that you should be really emphasizing and bringing to life. That doesn't mean that if the CEO has a blog that comes out and you genuinely want to support the CEO and it's on a different topic, by all means, we want you to share that. And we encourage you to share that. But when you do, tell your community why you're doing that. So it goes back to your truth. So no matter what you share, no one, oh, there goes my light. No matter what you share, no one should ever question, did Danielle really share that? Is there someone that's hacked her account? Yeah. So that's really important from that perspective. And then when it comes to the, we have some colleagues that have YouTube channels or have their own brands within their role in the organization. And that's all right as well, because when you join a company, you're not handing over your social presence to a company. In some essence, you're almost like renting just a piece, maybe about a third or a quarter of your overall brand to that organization to be able to connect and enable your role there to help yourself and the brand kind of take it to the next level. And then when you leave and go somewhere else, you continue. So I always say to someone, don't become the brand, because when you leave and go somewhere else, you're lost in that middle transition. You no longer know who you are. And then you start again, and now you start broadcasting for the next brand, and then you keep going. That doesn't help you at all. And actually, it doesn't help the brand either. So you kind of have to really be clear of who you are and then how you're going to enable yourself to connect to that organization.
Yeah, and now we're talking about the connection between the employee brand and the employer brand. And I think it's at a values level, is it? Or I'm just going to mention, I'm going to dive into that because this is what this conversation is all about. Now, where did we have here? We've got, so Liam, hello, happy Wednesday, great to listen. Oh, there's a bit of a sub-conversation going on here, so we'll let that happen. The point of the governing body and compliance is essential and agreed upon. That cannot be tweaked by employees. Yeah, great point.
Agree. Yep.
Yeah. The need of what, why, and how it impacts the SOP document is needed to encourage employee advocacy. Wow. This is great stuff. I'm going to
Dan's amazing.
Yeah, brilliant. I think this is a really valid point. We all have things which we resonate more than others. Authenticity is the key. So I'm going to come back to that because we're talking about the connection between the employee brand and the employer brand.
And you hate that word, by the way.
Huh?
You don't like the word authenticity, by the way.
Oh, no, I do. It's just, I always joke with Tim Williams at Analytica that we need a bell to ring, every time we say that word, because it's like it always comes up, authenticity. It's true, though, isn't it? How do you teach that, though? How do you get an employee to discover what they're about? Because in my experience, that's the bit that is the hardest part, right? Because nobody really asks them those questions. They come in to do a job. I get the job. It's on a job description. But how do I get to that layer? A lot of executives struggle with this a little bit. Like, who am I really? And how does that connect to the brand? How do you work that through then?
That's a great question. I mean, and I'm certainly not an expert in terms of, digging in and helping someone find their true self, but what we do from a social perspective is when we do our training, and even whether it's documented in real life recording, it doesn't matter. We try to really make it focus on real experiences. So I think it's great to just have, documents that tell you, here's the tips for writing content, here's the tips for publishing, and here's the tips for building engagement, etc. But it's one thing to read it, and it's another thing to actually do it. And that leap from reading and nodding your head and physically doing it is massive. And it's loaded with fear, insecurities, and every other, imposter syndrome, like anything that could and can show up is going to in that gap. And so we do focus on working with employees right down to one-on-one. And so when we do trainings, we always say, if anyone is ending this training and wants to continue the conversation or maybe dive into a specific use case for what you're trying to accomplish, then you reach out to us and we will make time for you, because you are the most important people in this organization. And without you and your voices and your points of view, everything else is relying on, traditional advertising, which has its role, but I mean, it's very different, and especially in today's environment. And so we do work with you. And an example is, I often say, if we're working with external kind of client-facing professionals, right? They know the content that even I share better than they think, and they don't think about it. But when you start breaking it down and you ask someone, "What did you do today?" and they'll start telling you, "Well, I had a meeting about this, or I met with a client on this, or I focused, completed this RFP," and they kind of ramble through. I'll be great. So when you did that, what was the topic? And then they'll start telling you what the topic was. Great. And what did you share about that topic in order to maybe convince them or to help them overcome that obstacle that you were discussing? Then they'll share what that was. And just keep breaking it down until you get to the what and then how. And then I'll be like, "What you just said, what did you just say?" And I'll start typing. And then I'll literally say, that is a comment. Or this is a reason why someone really needs to attend your webinar, because you're going to talk about those three things that are top of mind right now for employers who are going through an open enrollment season. Or, it might be a new document where you're sharing these insights that can enable them to build that plan for next year. So it's kind of helping people rethink, because they think too big. They think like they have to write as if it's a white paper, when it really needs to be just those small nuggets of conversation. So if every one of us here captured 10 things that we did today, those 10 things are probably going to educate, inform, inspire others on this platform who want or need that information or are trying to figure out how to do it themselves. But we tend to think it's frivolous.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just reapproaching. And then what we do is we role play. So we literally pull up something in Mercer Voices, or we go into LinkedIn, and maybe if we're on LinkedIn and I'm working with someone with an HR buyer audience, we will go to one of our digital water coolers, is kind of what I call them, which means either centers of influence for that particular topic, major events where your target audience is going to go and attend for that particular topic. It could be other employees that you want to build relationships with. It could be clients, it could be prospects, it could be PR and media. Who are your digital centers of influence? And I always say, write them down, and then let's go visit one. And then we go visit one. Okay, so here's the piece of content. Is this the right audience? Yes. Is this content something relevant? Yes. Great. So what would you comment? And of course they freeze again, which is normal. We'll say, okay, so let's quickly read the message and just open up the asset and let's look through it. If it's 70 pages, we're not going to read it. It probably shouldn't be set up this way on social. So let's assume it's just a more relevant document. What is a nugget in here, or what is something that you do in your job every day that you can connect to? So we find that. Now, do you know something more about this? And they're like, oh yeah, actually, this is something we have done, or I'm talking about this next week. Oh, great. So now you can't sell yourself in someone's comment, or you don't want to sell yourself in someone's post. So now how can you add to this, right? So what piece of additional information can you add? What question can you spark? Or what can you compliment them on because you align on something that they're sharing? So find those common values and then add that in so that the person sees that as you're kind of adding to the conversation. You're leading with gratitude. You're elevating them as an SME or a speaker. So kind of think about that. And then depending who it is, if it's a client, maybe you can have a little bit of a different twist, right? There's some familiarity, so then you can add something there. And now these become touch points, especially with clients, where you're not going to pepper them with emails every day. But if you had that conversation, maybe you had a follow-up email, and now you show up in any of their social conversations, they're going to think of you again, but in a very positive way, and that you're contributing to their conversation. So now they're going to be top of mind. You're going to be top of mind for the business side of what you're doing. So we kind of bring them through that journey, and it works. And we do that over a 30, 60, 90 day. And by the time you get to the 90 days, you're off and running.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll pair you up with people because, again, there's fear. So we might pair you with an influencer that we're working with. We might pair you with an internal advocate that we consider our top voices, which are the top 1% of the organization, because that person has a strong comfortability externally, and we're going to ask you to have social conversations with that person. We might put you into our ecosystem over on Twitter, which is much more conversational around extracurricular activities, less about work, and have you share into there so that you just start talking about what you're cooking on the weekend, whether you've been running, exercising, whatever it is you're doing, and then we'll bring you back into kind of a more business conversation on LinkedIn once you've built those skills. So there's a couple of different ways that we approach it, but that's a nut that you have to crack. And the last thing I'll say is sometimes you can't. Sometimes the person will just say to me, I just want to share the content that's brand approved exactly the way it is. That's it. That's it. And we respect that. And we know that they play a role in doing that. It's limiting to the employee more so. than the brand. But we totally respect that. And that's why we also kind of segment our entire population by kind of persona, so that we know who is really going to be always that trusted colleague that's going to share whatever we ask them to share, versus who's that person that is really starting to find their voice, versus who's that person that's just going to champion the conversation.
Yeah. So there's a few things that I wrote down as you were talking about that. When you talk through and show them a piece of content and how to digest the content so they can comment or maybe share it, or, quite often I've experienced that people learn from that content as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start to figure out that actually LinkedIn isn't just a place to be present and part of conversations. It's actually a source of learning and inspiration. And then they start to, so it has a second thing as well. There were so many things that you mentioned there, actually, that I can't even read my writing, so I'm just going to go to the comments.
Actually, I will say one thing too. Maybe if we can just go back for a second, because I think it's an important point. When you talked about kind of getting started, the whole concept of policy, and Jant had some great comments added into that. The one thing we need to also remember when you're starting, whether you're starting with a pilot, you're starting top down, bottom up, is build the entire program around your people, not the brand.
Yeah.
More often than not, it's common sense as an employee to build it around the brand. Because if you're in marketing or you're in communications or whatever function you reside in, your goals, the KPIs that you're held accountable to, and so is your team, are going to be company focused. It makes sense. But for advocacy, so define those, you need to have those, but then flip it over and focus on now what's in it for the employee. Why should they invest in the brand? And especially for those employees that may not already be active on social or not have like a real self-motivating presence on their own personal side, those people really need the why. And then when you message with them, when you do the training, lead with that. It's important to show them the brand contribution as well, because people want to know how they connect to the bigger picture, but lead with what's in it for me with the employee. And that makes a really big difference, because it shows that you care about them. You're here to help them, and that carries forward in their career. It's not just about what you're doing right now at Mercer. It's about you as an individual.
Yeah, and I do actually wonder if that's why a lot of programs don't succeed or don't fly as high as they should, because it comes from a brand-centric point of view and not employee-centric. Jan said, training and communication seems the hidden message and is a continuous process. Great. Oh, wow, there's loads more comments. I think this was a really valid point. We all have things that really resonate more with others. Oh, I think I've said that one already. Right, coming back down. Love the breakdown to the nugget. I know, I'm just so not very professional on this, but need your helping employees to share the unique insights. They think too big. Spot on. Well done, Michelle. I think you're absolutely right. I can see Ryan's probably, which one's she going to pick next? He's in the back like, which one? Great point. Employee advocacy needs to be built around employees and not the brand. Absolutely. So I've got another question that an executive said to me, and I want to talk about how you work with HR and the employer brand and the employee. What if the employee brand gets bigger than the employer brand? Is that a case? Is that something that we should be thinking about, or not to worry?
I mean, how would you define that?
I don't know. I did hear this from another organisation where a particular employee was getting almost celebrity influencer status, and a few folks, senior leaders, it was a completely different companies, not even a customer of ours, but they were getting a little bit, not sure how we feel about this. This is getting uncomfortable. This person is on stages, and that's our spot, is it not? How? You're laughing.
Okay. No, I'm laughing, but I thought I just wanted to kind of confirm. I mean, we see that at Mercer.
Okay.
We see that now. We've seen that in the past, and that's a good thing. But let's go back to that whole concept of traditional on that spectrum to progressive, right? If you're a more traditional firm, that's going to probably set off a lot of alarm bells, because there is a sometimes conscious, hopefully more unconscious bias in organizations where people feel that they need the right person to be out on social media and be present. And there's a very clear point of view in some firms as to who is the right person to talk on that topic versus someone else. And an example might be if part of your firm is talking about, I don't know, healthcare, and maybe you have some SMEs that, see, your light went out.
Yeah, I know, my lights. Honestly, this is like the play that goes wrong, isn't it? What else can go wrong?
So you might have SMEs that write all your thought leadership, that are genuinely experts in their field, and that is great. That person may or may not have a presence digitally, but maybe in other realms, they're on stages, they're writing content, they're having really big conversations. And then you've got other employees who don't have that expertise. They're not SMEs, but they've built a platform externally because they're passionate about this topic, and they're more building that conversation. They're getting the word out. They're not out there pretending to be the expert, but they're absolutely challenging points of view. They're elevating points of view. And frankly, they're actually helping those SMEs also ride in their kind of reach on digital by bringing them along, because they're the ones speaking at the event, or they're the ones that authored the content. So we do look at internal employees and external influencers through personas as well. And there's different types, right? There's the SME type, there's the micro, there's the ones that are just there to kind of build that brand reach. And there's some that are connectors, and they're going to help connect people. And then we teach them that you, SME, don't have the reach that this person does, but this person is surrounded by your target audience. And so join them, right? She or he is connecting these conversations, and we want you to either join them. And if you're not comfortable doing that, then we can kind of connect behind the scenes and kind of dive into dark social, but you want to help them understand the value here. And then also on the opposite side, assuming what they're doing is not disparaging or harmful to the brand, everywhere they go, they're creating moments of delight. And people are like, who is this person? Oh, this person works at Mercer or at Apple or wherever. And so it creates an impression of that brand for free. So thank your employee. And that in turn gives back to the brand. And so you're building reach into communities that the brand wouldn't otherwise get into without paying for it. So one of the things we also like to do is demonstrate the dollar equivalence of what our employees generate for the organization across a myriad of KPIs, so that we can see we've got paid media, here's the impact it's having. We've got organic brand presence, here's the impact it's having. We've got influencer marketing, here's the impact it's having. And we've got our advocates, and here's the impact they're having. And that multiplier is always many X's more than these other areas. Now, they do work together, and it's important that you connect the dots, but when you really can show, if we take our people out, that's going to be a huge loss for the business. And then what we also do is we remove that top 1%. Because that top 1% often drives about 80% of the entire ecosystem. And so if you now don't want these people here who are running their own show, but are doing it aligned to the key messages, yet they just have their own platform as well, here's the loss. Here's what it's going to take away to your downloads, to your registrations, to your actual sales on the platform. So we kind of really make it demonstrate it that way. And for the most part, it absolutely works. If anything that is left over, it's egos. Okay. At the end of all that. And I mean, and that's really difficult, right? I mean, that's a really tough one to try and tackle. But then that's when we maybe say, okay, how can we help you, especially if that person wants to be social? Because we do have some people that are like, I want to go viral. They don't even know what it means. I want to go viral. I want my name to be everywhere. I want everyone to know who I am. So then we start showing them how to take advantage of colleagues who are able to build that presence, and join them, get into those conversations, and by association, start to build yourself up. Because I mean, honestly, to start it on your own, it's probably really tough. So take advantage of the centers of influence that you already have within the firm.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. I think, that was a tough question. It wasn't one I sent you. Sorry, Danielle, you answered it brilliantly. There we go. Love the question. Yes, this is great. Danielle, you outlined pros and cons well on my post with that Business Insider article. I'm so interested in this topic, and as I see it as a side brand, corporate clients can't argue with moments of delight. Isn't that lovely? I love that phrase, moments of delight. Tie in ROI, very smart. So thank you, Michelle. Right. I want to touch a little bit I want to come back to employee brand and employer brand. And I know we're kind of talking about that, but what's the connection with HR, Danielle? Where do you see HR fitting into this? Because historically, it's a bit, I always remember writing a blog in 2009 about this topic, about it being a bit of a hot potato. Does it sit in comms? Does it sit in marketing? Does it sit in HR? But I'm starting to see with the talent shift that's happening. How's HR getting involved in this, and how do you work with HR?
Yeah, I mean, I think HR is a key strategic partner. I mean, if I think of just my journey so far, kind of with our partnership with Mercer, we've actually been so the whole social ecosystem, which includes employee advocacy, influencer marketing, paid media, organic, everything is under one umbrella. I've been in marketing, I've been in communications, I've been in HR. So we've been in all of these different areas, and what's important is all of them have to work together because I mean, we essentially are a part of the overarching kind of communications for the firm. And then HR is the people function. So if we think about HR in modern terms, not kind of traditional where they were just kind of the people that you would go to when you got in trouble. Now they're really at the heart of every organization because it's the people function. And we're talking about advocacy, which is people. So it actually connects really well. So for us, they're one of our key stakeholders and one of our key internal clients. And we work with them to humanize the brand, to elevate our people, because yes, we elevate people through marketing, right? Because they're either thought leaders or SMEs, they're speaking at events. But then we also elevate through the executive office of the CEO because there's different things that our leadership is doing. But then we also do it through HR, like who are the people behind this brand anywhere in the world? What are they doing? Why do they show up every day? Why did they choose Mercer? What do they love about Mercer? And then we elevate and bring that to life as well. And then the other component then is talent, which falls under HR. And talent is critical now more than ever. And if you're not able to truly kind of connect those dots and then not leverage all social channels strategically in order to attract, engage, and retain talent, I mean, that's a huge loss right now because it's really hard to get good people right now and to get them to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a really good point. And I did have a question on this actually about the whole talent shift, how you attract talent crisis, people leaving, how you engage talent. And advocacy is a huge part of that. But I think it ultimately, does it not come back to culture, trust? You've already talked about trust. I find this fascinating, how an employee connects their personal brand values to the company brand values, and how actually it's the culmination and the collective of the individual voices that actually culminate the culture voice. Would you say that's true? Is it more that, or is it the brand driving the voice and the employees fit in? I don't know. I'm just thinking openly here because I find this fascinating.
Yeah.
Is it employee voice first, or is it brand voice first, or is it a meeting of the two? Talent will join a culture that fits their values, I guess. I don't know. I'm going totally off.
That's a great question, and I'd have to think there's probably more. It'd be great to also hear kind of what the community's thinking, but I have to think that there's more than one model. If I look at where I sit, and even if I look prior, right, I was at AIG for 10 years. Both organizations empowered people, were very progressive, and you could bring your points of view, but at the same time, in a non-intrusive way. It's just seamlessly integrated through every touch point, wherever you look internally on any site, through any meeting you're at, through any event you participate in. There's a consistency in kind of our perspective on something or our values around something. And I actually don't see the divide. It's not like someone's giving me a chart to memorize and like, this is what you have to do. It's just part of the DNA. So from the moment you have that first conversation, even interviewing, you talk about what it's like to be in this organization. What is it like to work here? How do people work? How do you communicate? How do you engage? How are you held accountable? How are you recognized and rewarded? And so the conversation starts so early that you either click with it and you ask questions and you're like, this connects with the way I feel too, or you start parting ways before you get too far. So I almost feel like we do a really great job from the very first point of contact all the way through. And I know, for example, I'm hiring right now, and I love hiring because it's such a great opportunity to meet so many people. And I'm very transparent about kind of how we work, how we don't work, the work we do, how people are recognized, how people get to learn, because it's important. And I say very openly, right, if this resonates with you, we want to keep the conversation going. But if this doesn't resonate, that's okay. You want to kind of figure that out early on, before you maybe kind of get too far, and then you're sort of committed, but then you no longer have that true connection, because that's, I think, when you lose the engagement as an individual, because now you've kind of lost the real magic for why you're here. And let's be honest, not every day is roses.
No.
There's going to be days where it's tough and things break, and you maybe got to do things differently, or you're just in a mad flurry because there's fires all day. And you need to be able to re-energize at the end of that day. And if you can't do that and show back up the next day excited, that's because there's something in the foundation, that true shared purpose isn't there. And for some people, they just kind of push that aside and keep pushing through because, they're looking for another job, or they're doing something else on the side in order to try and maybe leave corporate and start their own business. So everyone kind of needs to figure out their why. But I think it's critical that organizations make it clear from day one and all the way through, and that employees also show up knowing what they want. A lot of us, probably in fairness, we apply for jobs and we're just kind of just looking to see what resonates, but we don't really go in saying like, this is what I want. And if it's not this, then maybe I'm going to kind of go a different direction.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that, because I think actually this is where employee advocacy also has an opportunity, right? Because employees can see that culture, because what you're describing within the fabric of the organization is culture. And every touch point, right from the candidate experience through to hiring, through even to exit as well, the experience an employee has. But advocates, champions, ambassadors, whatever you want to call them in your company, also have a role to play in living that. So actually you can attract the right talent through empowering your employees to live up to that. And I think for me, that is the big connection between employee and employer brand. They can shorten that time to hire. They can onboard. They can bring the right candidates into the process that fits the values of the business. If you start to put those employees out there, it can have a massive impact. So.
Yeah, and I think even there's been so many reports. I mean, I think the Brunswick Group had a great report. I think it was last year at this point. And there's been a couple others though that talk about like the percentage of talent that will research a CEO or a leader or yourself as the hiring manager to see their presence before joining that organization. They'll also look and see from an organization like which of your leadership, whether it's executive level or below, are actually engaging on social, because you also get a real feel for that organization as well. And especially it helps tell talent, how equipped is this firm to really lead in the digital world? If no one is out there, I mean, that does pose some questions in terms of the future of that organization and how innovative they are and how agile they are. So I think more and more, I mean, just having that presence, whether it's employees, executives on social, contributes significantly, because you're also putting your culture outside.
Yeah.
You're allowing people to truly see it. And you can't fake that, right? Inside, you can sort of kind of craft it. But externally, you've got 35,000 employees that are doing whatever they want on social. It's really difficult to kind of contain that. So you have to be leading with trust. And then every single voice. I mean, it's really hard to not be yourself. If you've ever tried to like have a different persona that's not really you, it takes a lot of work. So even if someone goes out there really trying to be polished and show up in a certain way, the minute they start engaging in conversations in the comments, their real self comes out. And that's actually a really good thing. And then that's what people see. And then that's what they connect back with to the brand. So I do think another reason why advocacy is so powerful is that it enables the outside world to really appreciate and value kind of all that special stuff that's normally locked up inside a company.
Yeah, and hard to put in a job description. I've tried to be two different people. I used to have two Twitter accounts many years ago, and then I just got absolutely tired with trying to have the work Sarah and the home Sarah, and then figured out actually that I was the same person. So let's get that out. Also, you mentioned something about hiring managers as part of this process and the talent process and the employer brand. I'm going to highlight Anita on this actually, because Anita earlier this year, did a video as a hiring manager on social, and she can correct me if I'm wrong if she's still present, but a lot of the applicants that went through to interview stage came as a result of the video going out there, being seen by people, not through the advert that potentially went on to LinkedIn. I know Mike Umika's done this at ABB as well, had the same sort of experience. So the employer brand is lived and breathed through your your hiring managers, your employee voices. So
and we actually, I remember that video. It was fantastic. So that's a great shout out. And actually, I think Anita also did another video for the holiday season, where she actually had her whole team kind of send messages, something like that. And I love that as well, because I mean, that speaks more to the culture of a firm than any kind of brand awareness or brand kind of calculated content that you're going to put out there. So I think those are just the pieces that really make a difference. And I know for us, we actually, it was about a year and a half ago, we actually started integrating all of our talent, like our new hire opportunities, into employee advocacy as a new pillar, because yes, the talent team is absolutely putting it out there onto the platforms. We're using kind of paid and all the other strategies to actually attract talent, but why not our people? And so now our people are sharing this content. Everything, of course, is tracked, because we know every data point that's coming from every click and every registration. But we now know every time our colleagues share new opportunities, we know exactly how many people clicked, how many people actually went through to the page, how many people actually filled out a complete application, through to how many people were hired. And it is a massive multiplier effect on the number of people that are being hired through what our advocates are sharing compared to other channels. Now, that doesn't mean the other channels aren't meaningful. You want them all, but it does emphasize the power of truly going out there and saying, hey, I love it here. Here's why I choose to stay here. And now we're hiring. And here's why you should join. And that's a really big kind of differentiator in a sea of just job posting after job posting after job posting. And the fact that we can actually track it right through to how many people have been hired is really exciting, because not only can you recognize our people and reward our people, but you can also, again, speak to the power of truly empowering your employee voices.
Yeah, love it. There's a study, actually, I remember a few years back from JobFight, that said employees that are hired through other employees that are referred into the company, they onboard quicker, they stay longer, they're more engaged. This is referral recruiting. Oh, Anita's popped up. Thank you, Anita. There you go. The hiring manager video generated 80 to 90% of the applications, and they were all relevant. It's also to point out that I've been active on social media before, so I built up my connections. Good point. So it's,
and actually that's a great point as well, back to kind of getting started with advocacy. There's different points of view on this, but I stand with my kind of contrarian belief that I do believe you need to walk the talk. There's a very big difference between a social media team that is a genius at what it is, what they do, textbook genius, and they can talk about it all day. They can set up the programs correctly. They can put the content out correctly. There's a big difference between that and then a team that actually does walk the talk, especially for employee advocacy, because it is really difficult enough to bring employees on this journey. They're going to look you up. So if you're training people, or you're working with an executive and trying to equip them with the know-how to do something, let's not kid ourselves. Those individuals are going to look you up and go see what you're doing. And if they show up and you're kind of a ghost and you're not doing anything, it's not that they're going to ignore what you said, but it will kind of change the way they take that feedback or that input and apply it. If they, on the other hand, go and show up and you are doing exactly what you are teaching others to do, that's a whole different dynamic. Not to mention, it also enables you as a practitioner and maybe someone that is accountable for this role in the firm or a part of that team to keep current. Because honestly, all of us here that are listening to this conversation today know that every day on every platform, something changes.
Yes.
And you can't wait for the next book to come out or for that next webinar that you're going to register for that's going to give you everything you need to know for your next year's strategy. You've got to experience it, because also experiencing it also shows you that just because someone says it's going to work this way, it may actually be different for your brand and your communities. So I think it's so important, if you're going down this path of employee advocacy, become active yourself. And I would say the same for talent. If you're applying into a role, I mean, for crying out loud, be active. I'm always baffled when I get a resume and they're a social ghost. And that doesn't mean that they're not incredibly valuable, and they could absolutely play a very valuable role. But think about what you're applying for, and is a social presence something that's going to help differentiate me in a sea of a lot of really good talent? And if it is, how are you going to build that up? to enable people to always want to be choosing you.
Yeah, brilliant advice, honestly. And I said this would be 40 minutes, Danielle. I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen. I'm going to ask one last question, and I love all the comments. I'm trying to keep up with them all, and this is brilliant. Thank you. It's reinforcing the conversation and pulling out the key points that you're getting from it. My last question, because you kind of touched on it at the start, is about different time zones and different cultures. Can you share a little bit about, maybe in the context of advocacy and activating employees on social, how cultural differences, how do you do that across the globe? And are there any cultural differences?
Oh my goodness, yes. Most certainly are. So, I mean, it's a great question. And actually, if anything, I almost feel like I was at AIG for 10 years before I came here. And that's a story for another day. But long story short, from my very first day on the job, I traveled the world for 50% of the year for 10 years. So I have spent a significant amount of time in many, many, many countries. And it really allows you to understand the depth of commonalities, of shared values, and also the importance of the differences. And so that is really important when you think about employee advocacy, because yes, there are maybe global overarching objectives or kind of global goals that we're working around, but it's so important that you enable people to act locally. And so how do they take those goals and make them relevant for their communities, internally and externally, and allow them to build those points of connection? Because we don't know as much as they do, and you have to honor and respect that and empower those people. Then they're going to want to be successful, and they're going to make those dots connect. And sometimes that means the way we approach something might be changed slightly, the way we position something, the way we say something, the way we recognize and reward. So you really need to have that local empowerment. But at the same time, when it comes to kind of KPIs, et cetera, that is definitely something that we are consistent with, so that we can understand what is driving what maybe isn't working as well. So we can dig in and find out, maybe it's even deeper than that. Like, what do we need to maybe do different or approach differently? Timelines might be different, so that it really can work and be effective and inspire and engage at a local level. Yeah. So that's kind of one big point. And the other thing is too, is think about just your communications ecosystem, right? We often might be like, oh, we've got to get this out. There's a new something that's happening. And of course, if anyone is using kind of a global platform like we do, it's really easy, right? Click a button, boof, out it goes. But what if it hits someone at 3 a.m. and someone else at 9 p.m. and someone else at 1 p.m. And, be respectful and thoughtful about when you're actually connecting with these people, because we can also push to phones, right? So you can have mobile enablement, you can have email enablement. There's a lot of different ways we can connect with our people. So think about where they're at when you are communicating with them, and then align to each of them, right? It's all about the employees at the core. So make sure you're going to connect with them at a time that's respectful, at a time that is actually when they're going to want to and be in a position to receive that conversation. Because, you and I both know, if we've received messages at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then in comes the rest of the world over top of that, and by the time you start your day, it's way at the bottom.
Yeah.
So we do really try to focus on kind of connecting, recognizing, and working collaboratively to ensure that everything we do is going to be the best for everyone.
Yeah, there are so many things I've taken from this conversation. I've highlighted a few, but for on that point, employee first. Thank you. You're welcome, Michelle. Thanks for the informative session. I'm bringing it to a close now, but employee first, thinking about your communication system, enabling globally, but acting locally. So that cultural difference, respect it, know about it, learn about it. There is something called the cultural maps. I think I may have this wrong. I might put it in the comments afterwards. A fascinating thing about how different countries respond differently to the different ways of working. It's fabulous. It's a great piece of research project. Talking about elevating your people, moments of delight. This is just fabulous. I mean, I always enjoy talking to you, Danielle. I could talk to you about 2 hours. I don't know why I said 40 minutes. That was never going to happen. I don't know what was I thinking, but absolutely brilliant. And it's just wonderful to hear you share such candid insights with the community. And thank you to all the community for all the comments, highlighting things, asking questions. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Always a pleasure, Danielle.
No, it's been great. And I'll definitely join the conversation afterwards. I think to me, the most important part is community. So being able to jump in there, share their enthusiasm, answer questions, ask questions. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. This is a great conversation. It's such a big topic to unpack. And there's so many different angles that this can be taken. So I appreciate the opportunity to even just join today for our brief 55 minutes and try to dive into some of this and just get the tip off those icebergs.
Yeah, we didn't even see your puppies either. Never mind, maybe next time. So
no, now they must be sleeping. I hear nothing. It's silent.
Well, that's just how it is, isn't it? So, all right. Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone, or any time of day.